Hi, I'm Lisa Bardot, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to draw this simple yet beautiful flower using digital watercolor in Procreate. This is a really fun tutorial that will teach you a lot of foundational techniques that you might use in drawing other watercolor flowers. I'll teach you how to draw petals, including how to make them look a little dimensional. You'll learn a fun blending technique that's going to create a wet-on-wet watercolor effect. And there's even a little bit of shading that we'll add to our flower. For this tutorial, we're going to be using brushes from my Watercolor Wonder brush set. It's a set of 50 brushes and 5 canvases for joyful digital watercolor painting. If this is your first time using this set, I would watch my Watercolor in Procreate tutorial, which will take you through all the different brushes, the best ways to use them, plus lots of tips and tricks to make authentic looking digital watercolor. You can purchase this set at bardotbrush.com. And if you're new to Procreate, I recommend watching my Procreate for Beginners tutorial to get you started with the basics. Let's get started. I'm here in the Files app where I have my Watercolor Wonder canvas folder saved. And for this piece, I'm going to be using the rough paper canvas. So I can just go ahead and tap that file and it will import into Procreate and open up. Let's begin by selecting a brush. I'm going to start by going into the core set. These are the brushes that I use to draw the base shapes of my paintings. And for this piece, I'm going to start with the hard edge round brush. Then I'm going to go over to my colors and I'm going to pick a very light purple. When you're doing watercolor, you want to start with your lightest values and then build up to your darker colors gradually. So we'll start with the light purple. My brush size is at 56%. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit and we'll start by drawing our first petal. And the thing to keep in mind is we want to draw these in one continuous stroke. So I'm going to draw the outline of my first petal. It's this kind of triangular shape with like a wavy edge on top. Then when I get back down to the beginning, I'm going to keep my pencil on the screen and continue coloring in. If I use a little bit heavier pressure, the brush will get a little bit bigger, so it'll be faster to fill it in. So there's my first petal. And my next petal is going to be the same shape, but it's going to kind of curve around like this. So I'll start here in the middle, kind of curve, do that wavy edge, and then come back around and then color it in. And then we're going to do the same thing to make kind of a curved petal on the other side. So I'll make a line that kind of curves around, does that wavy edge, and then comes back around like that. And make sure to color that all in too. For our last two petals, we're not going to do the wavy edge because these petals are closer to us. So they're actually going to be like kind of turned up a little bit. So we're going to do round shapes for them. I'm going to rotate my canvas a little bit so it's a little bit easier. And so we're going to do 2 more petals, but these are going to kind of be like teardrop shapes. So they're going to curve around and go like that. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. So these are very flat shaped because they're more foreshortened because they're kind of facing towards the viewer. So I've drawn all my petal shapes. The next thing I want to do is to add some hue shifts within these shapes. So we're going to go up to our layers and we're going to turn on alpha lock on this layer. I don't tend to use alpha lock a lot when I'm doing digital watercolor because it looks more natural if you don't, but it's great for adding hue shifts to shapes that you've already drawn. So I'm going to take 2 fingers and swipe to the right on that layer. And you'll know alpha lock is on because you'll see that checkerboard pattern. And that just means that I can only draw within these shapes I've already drawn. Then I'm going to go back to my brushes and I'm still in the core set and I'm going to go down to the blooming wash brush. And then I'm going to choose kind of a bluish color, maybe a little bit more saturated. And increase my brush size a little bit. Maybe I'm at like 35%. And then I'm just going to kind of add some little spots of this other color, just so there are some nice variations. Maybe I'll get an even bluer color and just kind of layer those in. It'll be very subtle, but it'll look really nice. So I'm going to add some turned up corners on these petals here. So I'm going to go into my brushes and I'm going to switch over to the glazes set. And I'm going to choose the hard edge round. This is the glaze version. And then for my color, I'm going to choose kind of a bluish purple, not too dark, something like that. And then here on this edge, we're going to draw the like little turned up part of the petal. And before I do that, I need to go into my layers and turn off alpha lock. So swipe to the right with 2 fingers. Alpha lock is now off. And for these little turned up parts, we're going to be drawing a shape that's something like this. It's going to be pointy, wide, and kind of wavy on top, and then pointy again, and then kind of curved and flat on the bottom, something like that. And I'm going to do that with one continuous stroke. So I'm going to start really pointy, kind of make this wavy edge, and then make it pointy again. And I'm going to draw the bottom like that, and then fill that whole thing in like that. And then I'll do the same thing on this petal. So turn it so it's at a better angle for me. So really pointy, kind of do the little petal, turned up wavy part. And then draw on the bottom. And then fill it in. And then I think I might do a little bit on this petal right here. So really pointy, kind of come up, make it wavy, and come back around like that. And then using the same brush, I'm going to do a little technique using the blender tool to add some kind of like detail. Zoom in over here. And all I'm going to do is just kind of add a little bit of this dark purple color, just draw kind of like a chunk along the top edge of the petal, something like that. And then add a few lines that kind of follow the curve of the petal like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to end up blending these with our blender brush. So we just want to add some color here. So something like that. And then some lines, kind of like that. And I'll do that on all my petals. Make these ones follow the curve of the petal. And then a little bit right here. We've kind of only got this one side to work with. And then there we go. And now this one. Okay. All right. So that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to switch over to my tool set in the brushes and choose the Precise Blender. I've got my brush size set to about 13%. My opacity is down just a little bit. It's at 81%. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to basically do a lot of downward strokes like this to kind of drag that color down. Maybe I'll make my brush size a little bit bigger. And so we're kind of like blending that hard edge of that darker purple while also pulling some of the color down. And then we're also going to kind of blend these lines that we added just to make them a little bit softer. So that looks something like that. And you can also come in here and just blend it a little bit too, like that, if you have any hard edges. But that's looking really good. So I'll come over here and do the same thing. Play with your brush size. That'll kind of dictate how much color is pulled down. Be a little bit bigger here. There we go. There we go. That looks really nice. And then don't forget to blend the lines. Just kind of follow that same curve of the petal. There we go. Looking good. Let's do this one here. I'm always following the curve of the petal with these strokes. So lots of little strokes. Kind of blend that down. Very pretty. Let's do this one here. Kind of want to be careful not to blend that edge there of that like turned up part. And then this one, maybe a little smaller with my brush size. Okay. So now we've got some lovely details on our petals. So now I'm going to focus on the center part of my flower, and I'm actually going to erase away part of this so that I can draw the center in. So I'm going to go over to my eraser tool. I'm going to make sure I'm in the tool set. I'm going to choose the watercolor eraser brush. And then I'm just going to kind of erase, oops, maybe go a little smaller with my brush size. I'm at like 45%. And then I'm just going to erase kind of some bubbly shapes from the middle of that. And that's going to represent kind of the center part of the flower. There. And now I'm going to make the center part of the flower on a separate layer. So I'm going to go to my layers. I'm going to tap the plus sign to create a new layer. And I'm going to set the blend mode of this layer to multiply. So tap the little N and then choose multiply from the list. And now I'm going to switch colors to a nice warm yellow, nice and saturated like that. And for my brush, I'm going to start here in the glazes set, and I'm going to choose the jagged edge brush. So this is the glaze jagged edge. My brush size is about 25. And I'm just going to use this brush to do one continuous stroke to kind of fill in the middle of this. And I don't mind that there's some kind of going off the edge. I kind of like the way that that looks. And then I'm going to come in again and do another layer of that, but not over the whole thing. Leave some of this light up at the top. And then I'm just going to place like dots of that brush along the bottom just to kind of give this a little bit more texture. You can even make your your color a little more orange, a little darker, and maybe the brush size a little smaller, maybe even a little darker than that. If you want to add some like dark little dots along the bottom, just to give it more dimension. Now I'm going to go back to my original flower layer and just add a little bit of almost like shading around these like turned up parts. So I'm going to go back to the original flower layer. And for my brush, I'm going to choose the hard edge round glaze brush. And then for my color, I'm just going to, I'll just sample this purple color. And I'll try that color. I'll see if that works. I just want to add a little bit of darkness kind of on the edges of these turned up shapes. So I'm just going to kind of color over part of this like this. And then I'll go over it one more time, maybe I'll get a little darker right there. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. So kind of in this little pointed area. Kind of color that in. Like that. And we're going to come back and blend that in a minute. There we go. Another layer right there at the corner. And doing this is going to help make this kind of shape seem a little rounder. Give it a little more dimension. And this side. Okay, so now that we've added those little bits of darkness, we're just going to blend that so it's not so harsh. So I'm going to go back to my tools. I'm going to choose the precise blender and then just blend that edge in like that. There we go. All right, the last little thing I'm going to do on the flower is just add a little bit of shadow. Maybe that would be cast by the center of the flower. So I'm going to switch back to my glazes. I'm going to choose the edge pooling brush from the glaze set. And I'll stick with the color I have. I think it's a little dark, so I'm actually going to make it a little lighter. When you're using the glazes, it's best to like see what it looks like when you use it and then kind of adjust your color from there. Maybe I'll make it a little less saturated. Be a little darker. There we go. That'll look good. So I'm just going to come in here and add just a little bit of shading from this like center of my flower here. Kind of like that. So we can imagine since this is the lightest part of this, we can assume that the light's coming this way and would maybe cast a shadow down here. And then I'm going to come in and do another layer because this brush, again, is self-darkening. So I can layer on strokes and they'll get darker and darker. So right close to it, I'll make it a little bit more darker. And then I can get my precise blender from the tool set and blend that a little if I'd like. But I kind of like this hard shadow here. So I'm not going to blurry blend that too much, just kind of the inside of that mark. Okay, so our flower's looking really nice. The last step is to, of course, add a stem. So for that, I'm going to go to my layers And I'm just going to reuse this same layer that has the center of the flower on it. And for my brushes, I'm going to go into the core set and I'm going to draw the stem using the hard edge flat brush from the core set. I'm going to go into my colors and I'm going to choose kind of a warmish green. And I'm going to start with a really light color like that, not too dark because we're going to build up our darkness as we go. So that's what I'll use for that. So I'll just draw a line that kind of starts right below the center of the flower and then goes down to the bottom like that. And I do have some overlap here that I don't really want, so I'm just going to use my eraser to erase that. I don't mind if there's a little bit of overlap because that actually looks kind of natural. Like if you're painting and you didn't quite get it perfectly, that would be how it looks. So I don't mind that happens. Okay, so now we're going to add some leaves and then we're going to build up some strokes. For my leaves, I'm going to choose the hard edge round brush. This is really good for leaves. And now I'm going to create some just kind of almondy leaf shapes. So I'm just using light pressure at the beginning, heavy pressure, light pressure to make it nice and pointy, and then doing the same coming down. So light pressure where I want the leaves to be pointy, kind of heavier pressure towards the middle. And I'll do one more leaf here. Again, light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure to make a leaf shape. And I did that all in one continuous stroke. Okay, so that's our first layer for the leaves. So now we're going to layer on strokes using the glaze brushes to make it darker. So let's go to the brushes. Now we're going to switch over to our glazes set because we're layering strokes. And let's choose the hard edge round brush. And I'm going to make my color a little darker, maybe even a little cooler. I like to kind of like mix hues sometimes when I'm doing this. So I'm going to actually start by making just one side of this a little bit darker. Since we established that our light's coming from this way, our dark side would be this side. So I'm going to maybe start here and just kind of darken one side of my stem. Just leave like a little highlight on one side of the stem. Something like that. And I'm going to get an even darker color now, just a little bit darker. And there's also going to be kind of a dark, it's going to be really dark where it's underneath the flower. So I'm going to darken that even more. Like that. Just draw like a little shadow, kind of curve around. So something like that. I'll come in here and darken right there even more. Just by laying around another stroke. Okay, that's looking good. I'm also going to darken one side of my leaf here. So just layer on another stroke. Like that. And I'll do the same on this one. Good. And now I think I'm going to come in with my glaze dry liner brush and just add some more detail. So maybe I'll get a little bit lighter of a color just to add some kind of subtle lines going up and down the stem like that. This will give it some texture. And for the leaves, I'll kind of do the same thing. Just do some up and down strokes, kind of following the curves of the leaves, just to give it some extra texture. And for one last finishing touch, I thought it would be great to add some watercolor paper texture to the entire piece. So I'll show you how to do that next. You're going to go up to your layers and you're going to create a new layer. And we're going to place this layer above our Watercolor Wonder texture group. So just tap, hold, and drag it so that it's above this texture group. And then you're going to set the blend mode of this layer to multiply. So tap the little N and scroll down in the list until you get to multiply. Then you're going to go into your brushes. You're going to go into the tool set and you're going to choose the watercolor paper brush. And then for the color, we're going to set that to pure white. So you can double tap close to white and it will select a pure white value. I've built some settings into this brush that will produce the perfect value for your watercolor paper texture as long as you use a pure white value. And then finally, you can adjust the scale of your watercolor paper using the brush slider. I am at around 50%. And then I like to zoom out just a little bit like that. And you're going to go over the entire piece with one continuous stroke. So like this. And now if you zoom in, you can see that beautiful watercolor paper texture over the entire piece. Sometimes it's nice to have that pure white background, but I also like the texture of the watercolor paper too. And now that I've finished, this flower is all done. I really love this piece. I think it turned out so nice, and overall it's fairly simple. There's not really a lot to it, and you can use these techniques to paint lots of different kinds of flowers, especially the blending technique that we used on the petals. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, I'm Lisa Bardot, and I help people find their creativity through drawing on the iPad. If you'd like to support me, you can check out my premium brush sets that inspire creativity, including Watercolor Wonder, at bardotbrush.com. And if you want to take your learning to the next level, you should join Art Makers Club. Art Makers Club is a joy-filled creative community and learning hub for digital art makers. As a member, you'll get access to a growing library of in-depth courses, live virtual events and tutorials, free Procreate brushes, and more. In our community clubhouse, you get to connect with like-minded learning artists, share your work, ask for feedback, participate in discussions, and so much more. Come join us in the club. You can learn more at artmakersclub.com. If you're sharing your work to Instagram, I would love to see it. Use the hashtag BardotBrush. Thanks and happy art making! If you like this video, please subscribe for more awesome tutorials and check out one of my other videos. Thanks and have a great day!